Russians will not stop if they're not stopped. Before 2014, when the Russians annexed Crimea and started in parts of Lugansk, Donetsk, and all the wars shooting across the border were almost daily and taking. There was war in Georgia 2008. There were some wars in Chechnya, inside of Russia, but they were cruel as well when the whole population was swept and bloodshed. But not even in 2008 or 2014, Western world didn't react enough.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you to the Krasno Global Event Series. Thank you for being able to make it this afternoon. I'm Klaus Larres, and I'm the Richard M. Krasno Distinguished Professor of History and International Affairs here at UNC-Chapel Hill. I've run the Krasno Global Event Series since 2012, and we are still going strong. Today, our guest is the Ambassador of Lithuania to the United States, Her Excellency Audra Plepytė, who has been ambassador in Washington, D.C. since 2021. Ambassador, how are you today? Thank you for joining us today.
Good afternoon, Professor, and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure and honor to be joining you.
Oh, we have to thank you. Thank you for finding the time. Today, we are talking about the situation in Eastern and Central Europe and the situation along the European border with Russia. We will talk about the Ukraine war and whether or not any progress in ceasefire arrangements have been made. We will talk about Europe's defense and military situation and, of course, about how Lithuania views the threat perception in Europe and how Lithuania sees the recent global developments. There's no one better to shed light on these and many other military and economic issues than the Ambassador of Lithuania to the United States. Let me introduce the Ambassador briefly to you. Audra Plepytė has assumed the duties of Ambassador of Lithuania to the United States in May 2021. Prior to her appointment, she was Permanent Representative of Lithuania to the United Nations from 2017 to 2021. She served as Director of the European Union Department at the Ministry for Foreign Affairs from 2014 to 2017. And she was Lithuania's ambassador to Spain and the World Tourism Organization between 2010 and 2014. And she was also the director of the ministry's personnel department in the years before. Ambassador Plepytė has had many other positions within the Lithuanian diplomatic service, dealing with conflict prevention and human rights, and also had postings to Brussels, for example. The ambassador was educated at Vilnius University in Lithuania, and she also studied at Oxford University in the UK. Welcome, Ambassador Plepytė. It's great to have you here at the Krasno Global Event Series. Let me ask you straight away. Is the Ukraine war coming to an end soon, and has Putin won? What do you make of the recent phone calls between Trump and Putin and Trump and Zelensky? What is Lithuania's view of all of that? And also, what is your own personal view, if you can let us know?
Okay, straight question from the very beginning, the most difficult one, if it's ending or not. We hope that some ceasefire or the peace negotiations can be done and will be shortly, because I think it's nobody else so much as Ukrainians who want real peace and ceasefire, and the peace durable, strong, long-lasting. That, I think, is crucial thing. This war, I mean, you in the introduction, you mentioned that this war along the European Union's or NATO eastern borders and Eastern Europe. Actually, I could say that this war, it's being fighted in Ukraine, in the territory which is in the Eastern Europe. But this war is it's already global war, I would say, because Russian, when they started the war, and we know that because we still follow, we see where the message is coming from Kremlin to Russian people and to the global. They are fighting Ukrainians, but also they are fighting in Ukraine, but they're fighting the whole world, especially Western world, NATO, Europe as a total, and also United States. So we have to have that in mind. They want, by fighting in Ukraine, and of course, Putin's first objective is to make sure that Ukraine doesn't exist, that it belongs to Russia and it's somehow wiped out of the map, or geopolitical map, or at least that would not be a real souvenir country. But his also main objective, another one, is to shatter and to change European and transatlantic security architecture. So, and that's why it was so important also the whole Western support to Ukraine. And it's also now, it's so important to reach the peace, which would be durable and long lasting.
Yeah, I think everyone is interested in some good peace arrangement. But the question is, of course, how do we get to a good peace arrangement which is satisfactory to all sides? Do you think what was achieved recently, a partial cessation of violence and a stop on the attacks on energy infrastructure, do you think that is the right way forward, and will people stick to it?
It's right way forward, but I think it's very early to say in this stage. It's just to be very frank, though the President Trump's administration, this administration, is trying already for a while to reach ceasefire and to stop killing and bloodshed, but to still there were to be make sure the first attempts, the first talks. So it's still too early in the day to say how durable and that's, but what is really important, and that we know from our history, you're professor of history as well, which one, Russia understands only strength. If you talk from the position of strength, then you can achieve some peace and really tangible results. So that's why President Trump's attempt to talk about peace through strength, it's the right approach, and that should be continued.
There were two sides published communiques or statements after the Trump-Putin talks and also the Trump-Zelensky talks. And one side said what was in mind was a cessation of violence on energy infrastructure. And the other side, the American side, said it was energy and infrastructure. What is right? What is your understanding? Do we just talk about no attacks on energy vehicles like plants and nuclear power plants, of course, and other energy plants? Or are we also talking about civilian infrastructure?
There should be both. We will see, I think, with the end. We shouldn't be surprised. We know how Russia operates, what kind of misinformation they're saying, especially sometimes completely different signals when it was how it was spoken or what was agreed, and that's so I think we shouldn't be surprised that we get completely different messages sometimes from Kremlin that is now from the White House or some Europeans if they talk. So that is modus operandi for decades, if not 100 years. So we have not to surprised, but to have assurance that no infrastructure will be energy or some others would be targeted is very important. And we know, I mean, what Russians are doing. They're not targeting only energy infrastructure or any infrastructure of Ukraine. They're targeting many civilian objects as well, like hospitals, schools, kindergarten. So even civilian houses, cities. So stricter the ceasefire, that is better, I think, especially for the civilians, which are the victims. And we saw during this 3 years already of bloodshed how many civilians were victims. We now everybody forgot, but when we in 2022, when Ukrainians took fought back some its territory, Ypres, Bucha, and other things. So we saw what was left after Russians, how many civilians were just murdered. They were bodies lying on the streets, women, children, elderly people. They were not military personnel, but really civilians. Even they were mined. If those people who tried to rescue him or to take the bodies or some even toys for the kids, they were put some mines that would put injuries again for the civilians, for the children as well. So we shouldn't forget those pictures were so impactful in 3 years ago. Now we already speaking about this war as completely different as our infrastructure, something that we also have to think about the civilians.
Thank you. A lot of commentators have said that President Trump seems to appear to be softer on Putin and harder on Zelensky. Would you share this impression? And were you shocked by that White House Oval Office meeting between Trump and Zelensky, which we all know blew up in acrimony?
I mean, it's too early. We don't know many things what's going on between White House and Kremlin, between the US and Russia. So I would still keep optimism that everything and that President Trump also negotiates, and he showed, we can see from his first administration as well, really, that is one thing is tactics, another thing is the result as well. So we have many contacts also with his new administration, with his closest allies and that. So what is the common message from everyone? That the president knows how to negotiate, is tough, and we'll see. So we will see what is the final. I think sometimes we shouldn't judge from the beginning of negotiations, some tactics and how it would go. Yes.
Thank you. One does notice you are a diplomat. That's a very diplomatic answer.
Yeah, and about all thanks, you mentioned President Zelensky, but we can see how the UK leaders or French, Macron, Samuel were as well. So it's there were many good meetings in the White House.
Yeah, thank you. When we look at Lithuania, how concerned are the Lithuanian people about the threat from Russia? Do the everyday man and woman in the streets of Vilnius feel threatened by Russia, or is it only something which is, among politicians and diplomats?
No, first, very concerned, and I think the war in Ukraine for Lithuanians is almost as close as it were in Lithuania. I think everybody who comes to Vilnius or to Lithuania, they notice lots of Ukrainian flags, first of all. We hosted tens of Ukrainians in Lithuania, the refugees from the war, mostly women and children, and there were no non-refugee camp. People opened their houses and let them go. They were accepted to Lithuanian schools. They got some work even if they didn't speak Lithuanian. So it was for Lithuanians as well. We are 3 million, but we can raise like 15 million in a week to assist Ukrainians in whatever they need, or some military equipment, some weapons, or some humanitarian. So the people really see, they understand, and they see that the Ukrainians are fighting not only for their land, but they're fighting for the whole Europe, and for us including as well, because we share the border with Russia. In our case, it's a bit different. Hope everybody remember the map. So on the east side we have Belarus, but border with Russia is on the west side for us. It's the Kaliningrad region, which is enclave, which on the Baltic Sea, with the borders with Lithuania and Poland. So we knew already before what's happening, because Kaliningrad region is one of the most militarized regions in Europe, probably. There's lots of Russian military and divisions, and they have tanks. Of course, now they were moved in Ukraine, most of them, but still they keeping that base very strong, and to move from one, especially personnel, that's matter of days or weeks, not months or years. So it's still, and we witnessed in 2022 what Belarus is, that Belarus is like military platform for Russians to operate. They invaded Ukraine from Belarus. Now they seize that border and they don't do, but they are really the closest ally with Russia, and it's in military things, I would say, almost the same country, because they don't have. So they even increasing during those 3 years, they increased more military cooperation, and the Russians claim that they have, if not nuclear weapons in Belarus, so at least capabilities which can be very easily put. We also saw that 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago, Russia announced new military doctrine where they're creating additional armies. Now North and Moscow and St. Petersburg, because both would be, directed to the West. So they are not stopping. Of course, war in Ukraine drains their resources. They need personnel and they have equipment. If before the war in Ukraine, or this new phase of Ukraine, because the war started in 2014, we shouldn't forget, but the new phase started in February 2022, everybody thought that Russian army is very strong and very advanced. We realized that maybe it's not so technically advanced, but what those 3 years also that we shouldn't underestimate. They lose a lot. They don't care about their people because the thousands are dying daily, but they have lots of people and they don't care. If they die, they would have another people. And that's, for them, it's not a value, not like in our societies, Western societies. And the military equipment, where there would be tanks, ammunition, it's also so cheap in some extent and so easily fixed. They have now more tanks than before the war, before the 2022 February. So the military capabilities are there and very important, with the help of North Korea, Iran, and even China, as we know, because if they don't submit weapons, so they help with other things. So
thank you.
They remain military power, and I think we should understand that everywhere. We do understand that, especially in NATO eastern flank, whether it would be Lithuania or the Baltic states, or even Finland, Sweden. That's why joined NATO as well, realizing that it's better to be in their lines. But I think that would be for all.
Thank you. The Baltic states, including Lithuania, were part of the Soviet Union. Do you fear that Putin has ambitions to actually reconquer the Baltic states and reintegrate them into a greater Russia? So do you fear a Russian invasion, or is that more unlikely in your view?
Prediction is not the best thing in international politics and diplomacy either. But first, I would say we were not part even of the Soviet Union. We were occupied by Soviet Union. So it's the big difference, at least for us. That's why when we reclaimed independence, regained independence in 1990 and got in 1991, officially. So for us was natural way to become members of the European Union or NATO and to be part of the Western society and Western culture. So it's it's very clear, and it's our, the core of all the existence, and or whether it would be foreign policy, economics, and everything. So we are on that. What Russia wants, it's a good question. Of course, I think if they're not stopped, they want more and more. That's in their genes. That was in Russian Empire in the 19th century, if not talking even before in the previous also ages. That was Soviet Union as well. And I think, unfortunately, the current Russia hasn't changed that. They have this gene of expansionism. So if they were now Ukraine, we see what they're doing, trying to get in Caucasus, not in Moldova. So it's if they're not stopped, we don't know where they would where they stop. Some years ago, they spoke about Europe from Lisbon to Vladivostok, taking that they would be so.
But right now, you feel protected by Article 5 of NATO.
Of course. Yes, yes. I think that's what is the success story of the 20th century. That is North Atlantic Alliance, NATO. It proved to be a really guarantee of the stability for everyone, for Europe, for United States, and I think that also was the basis for our economic prosperity for both sides of Atlantic. Because when you are stable, when you have security, defense-wise, so that you can benefit from everything. Yeah.
There are some commentators who say that the United States nowadays is less committed to Article 5 and to NATO than, let's say, 10 years or 5 years ago. Would you share that, or are you more optimistic?
I think even that's very dangerous to question that and to say those fears and spread, because how prophecy, self-fulfilling prophecy could be as well. More you talk, more you believe, and then look that it would be something that no. But we don't, to be very frank, we don't see any notice. That's the only thing, the speculations, because of President Trump said something, or because administration, so maybe it's different than it was previous one. So that probably would be that Article 5 is not respected, but we didn't hear. We had just the Secretary General of NATO, Rutte, was here, and he had good meetings in the White House with administration, and that's also was very clear message that there is no hints or no that Article 5 is not respected or it's in danger.
Good to hear.
So I think it's, yeah, on the contrary, I would say the current administration and President Trump's attitude and the call for Europeans to take more care of Europe and to be serious about this defense and security, that shows that they care, because otherwise, if they don't care when to leave, they wouldn't mind. I mean, how Europe is paying and that how many countries are not fulfilling 2% or so. And in that sense, I think we even concur and very much supporting.
Tell us about Lithuania's military efforts. Compared to some other countries in NATO, even much bigger countries, Lithuania and the other Baltic states are doing a lot militarily.
As you mentioned, you were asking how preoccupied we are for our security and defense and what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, in Russia. So we do see that we have to be ready. Our motto, if you want avoid wars, prepare for the war. So and to be strong enough and so that nobody would even think to attack you. So that's why we are very much, first of all, what I mentioned, in the NATO, we are advocating that every ally, every partner should put their contribution to NATO. We do think, unfortunately, 2%, which was agreed in Wales some years ago, is already the yesterday commitments. We need today much more. Lithuania now is having almost 4% of our GDP dedicated to defense, is 3.93%. We think that this year we will reach 4%, and our economy is growing. It's one of the fastest growing economy in the region, in the EU. So for us, even this effort is even more than it's 4%. But already the government made a commitment starting from next year, would have 5 to 6% of our GDP to defense and security. It's a lot, but as you mentioned and you asked if the people very much supporting that. So it's not, and it's good that it's not done. Still, as I mentioned, an economy and everything is booming, and now even Lithuania, I can say, world happiness report was published yesterday. So we are number 1 in Central and Eastern Europe, globally with number 16. So that
Pretty good. Congratulations.
people feel happy despite what's on the geopolitical challenges next to our doors, and understanding that there are challenges, but that's also they support the government and the parliament's this seriousness that we have to invest into our defense and security. So we are allocating our GDP, but it is not, and it's also important that this money goes for modernization of the army, acquisition of the most advanced weaponry and technologies. We're also boosting our defense industry. Some years we didn't have almost anything, but we were very serious from advanced for already decades in laser technologies, in semiconductors, so IT, cyber. So all these things helps us also to create our defense capabilities and defense industry. So we are collaborating. We have Germany with investment. We are talking with US investments in producing in Lithuania, but we also have our businesses already investing in the US and defense industry. So we are very serious. We have now conscription army, which were before 10 years ago, we were thought that the professional small army would be enough. Now we see that we need conscripts. And yeah, some our steps a bit, we didn't expect we would need that 5 years ago to withdraw from such conventions at Ottawa, anti-personnel mines or cluster munition. But our geopolitical situation also forces us to do that. So we do take care of our defense, and we think we do understand where we are. It's Eastern NATO front line.
How strong is the Lithuanian army?
Sorry?
How strong is the Lithuanian army? How many people have you got under arms?
I think it's strong. Even we had with Americans, we participated in all the missions in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I think it's one of the best. Of course, Lithuania would never have such big numbers as United States, because our size is small.
Oh, I meant how many soldiers are in the army?
I have to double check how much exactly. Right now, talking, we have battalions, we have Navy, but we have also now this creating division. So we are still in the process how to say, to see according our needs how much we can do and what is that. But it's because army size is also very much dependent on the possibility to exercise, to absorb that. So we're also very much investing into infrastructure. You know, maybe we are working with Germans now. We have agreement together, bilateral agreement with Germany. The Germany on permanent basis will allocate brigade to Lithuania. We have American troops in Lithuania. That's battalion plus about 1,000 people, Americans one. And so it's, and we have such a small, they need to have exercises, what to exercise. So we're expanding polygons and which is,
thank you. Yeah.
You know, it's also that. And we have more than about Lithuania in itself, more than 20,000, 30,000, but I see it's very much in development. Some is professional, some are conscript. Also, we have civilian who are going like National Guard in the United States, so as well.
Okay.
So
talking about Germany, the Germans have just agreed to raise an enormous amount of debt to strengthen their military. Does Lithuania actually raise taxes to be able to afford the expanded military, or is it also debt financed?
we are looking for some means. Now we could allocate it is, but we will see whether it would be debt, borrowing from other things, or allocation. So it's mixture. We will see what is best. Yes.
Thank you.
But for us, it's very important sign from the European Union that they will not calculate that as death also. So that is, I think it's very positive.
Yeah, thank you. Russian influence is quite large in the Baltic states, particularly clandestine and intelligence influence. How can that be noticed in Lithuania? I know there's a lot of concern in all Baltic states about clandestine Russian influence. What is the situation like in Lithuania?
It's a big question. What do you mean by that? It's because it's, I mean, what I would say, another thing, thank you for this question, I will say, Russians are fighting, as is mentioned, in Ukraine. They're saying that they fight in Western, but they have already started activities against Europe or NATO. First, they've been already for decades very active in cyber domain, so attacking and trying to hack governmental internet infrastructure. We do remember in the United States, I think some years ago was as well a big challenge, a big event on that. So that's been already going on daily basis almost there. So we know how to deal with that. We have capabilities. We develop our local capabilities. Information war, we shouldn't neglect that. And it's all not going only against Baltic states. It's going through against Europe, against US, against all the what is Western, because they feel that is that the real enemy, NATO or European Union. So that is, and with the war in Ukraine, of course, it's even more. So we do, and that's different means what we can do, even educating population or something, building some channels, because it's as well we see as a big, but very recently they have started cyber hybrid or even kinetic actions against Europe. It's not only in the Baltic states. In Lithuania, it started with the pain drawn to the monuments or the Baltics, some Russian opposition, because Lithuania is hosting Russian opposition and Belarus opposition, the biggest oppositions abroad. I think they are in Lithuania. So there was some Russian opposition was beaten next to his house, and then it was easy to find who did that and why. They were contracted, some hired by the Russian services via internet, so they didn't know themselves. So it was dead end, but it was at least clear who did that. Very recently, a year ago or more, IKEA facility was put on fire, and there was this week the ruling by the court that accepting that was also hired by the Russian secret service to do those things. I think also many wrote the reports how many shadow fleet is forgetting the anchors and dragging anchors in the Baltic Sea. So a number of cables between Baltic states and Nordic countries were already damaged. Fortunately, they didn't make a big damage, but still that needs to repair. So they are showing signs. They are completely, which is directed to intimidate our population. I mean, our not only Lithuanian, but the whole European, because those things happen in other countries as well. And also to show that they are capable of that. So we're very much advocating that the response should be going not only from countries involved, but from the whole alliance. And we're very happy and thankful, grateful that some NATO ships were sent also patrolling in the Baltic Sea to ensure that damages of undersea infrastructure doesn't happen anymore, and we as alliance take care of that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Apparently there's strong electoral influence, or at least the attempted influence by Russia in Romania, in Moldova, in Georgia. Has that been noticed in Lithuania and the other Baltic states as well?
In Lithuania, we had a number of elections last year, the presidential elections and the parliamentarian elections. We didn't see like a big or something. There are some, but there's always in every democracy, there are parties which could say, or some people who speak quite strange, deliver quite strange message. sometimes directed against their countries, or so they might be involved in very nice talks that they are going for peace, or how you have to be friendly with your neighbors, but they didn't receive any support from their
That's good to
relations. Yeah.
That's clear, yeah. Can I just ask our audience that I will soon turn to take questions from the audience. So if you haven't submitted your question yet by using the chat function of your Zoom screen, then please do so, and we will be happy to ask the ambassador to answer your question. Lithuania is a firm member of the European Union and very active in European Union affairs. And recently we had certain differences between China and Lithuania, and Lithuania enjoyed the strong support of the European Union during that time. Have there been any lasting consequences from that episode, and what are Chinese-Lithuanian relations like at the moment?
I would say status quo from the last 2 years didn't change too much. So maybe not everybody knows what happened 2 years or almost 3 years, 3 years ago, not more than 3 years ago. Time flies. The previous government, but it was also already for a while. First of all, we want to diversify our policy and especially economy in the Indo-Pacific region, because we thought that, as everybody knows, that Indo-Pacific has huge potential. As a small country, we had very few embassies. We have embassy in Beijing, Tokyo, and almost that's it. So we opened embassies in Singapore, in South Korea, and one also trade office in Taiwan. And Taiwanese opened a trade representation in Vilnius. They call that Taiwanese, not Taiwan's, but Taiwanese trade representation. Another thing, there was some format 17+1, 17 EU countries plus China. It was created more than 10 years ago, now even more, probably 15 years ago, to boost economic cooperation. And then we thought, it's not, the whole European Union has to have relations with China, not dividing some countries, which were or eastern more, because there was more eastern flank. So it was created when eastern flank still was somehow new members of the EU. So I think they were used to create new. So we decided, no, we have to leave that formation, because we want the whole EU to have that. And we didn't allow also China to invest in our critical infrastructure. They wanted ports and some other things, because we thought, we know how it is to depend on Russia, on authoritarian regime, on some countries which are not, how to put diplomatically, not so strong on democratic values. So we prevented, and I think all these steps accumulated, and China, especially when we established, they allowed Taiwanese to open their trade representation. They said, okay, that's Lithuania was deleted from the custom declarations from overnight. So our business people who had trade with China, they couldn't sell their products. So all the ships, for instance, with beer or flour or some agriculture products, they didn't have where to go, because the Chinese ports were closed, or vice versa. And they also lowered embassy status from embassy to office of chargé d'affaires. Office of chargé d'affaires, if you study Vienna Convention of Diplomatic Relations, there is no such thing. We don't have in our laws as well that we can open office of chargé d'affaires. So we had to pull our diplomats from Beijing, because we didn't have. So they still have some diplomats in Vilnius, but not. So, and now it's more or less, that is it. But since they use this economic coercion measures, and you mentioned European Union, but it's not only European Union. Japan, Australia, I think South Korea, UK, US, they supported us. And European Commission put the case in World Trade Organization to see whether this practice was coercion measures. And then EU also adopted some instrument. If any country applies economic coercion measures against another European country, so that there's a mechanism how it can be dealt. So that's more or less, that's it, the story, and we continue. Of course, there may be some economics, as always in the business, they find their own ways. So I think
would you say
alcohol was sold in Taiwan or in Japan, on some other countries, that's just, and that's how it is. But I think it's very important. I think it's important the solidarity of all countries who showed, because from time to time some different countries suffer from some measures from China, and if you are alone, so of course completely would be difficult to face them. But when you are together, so it's easier, and we're very grateful for the countries who understood and supported us.
Would you say at the moment Lithuanian-Chinese relations have become normalized again, or are they still suffering from some degree of tension?
Something I would say it's like, still we don't have our diplomats still in Beijing, and it's still.
So Lithuanian,
and as we say that, I would say not diplomatic as well, but we say we China-free economy in that sense. We don't have Chinese investments or so in Lithuania.
And the Taiwanese trade representation in Vilnius, has it been renamed, or is it still continuing?
It's still the same, continues as it is, yeah.
Right. Let me ask our audience and ask Sivan to ask the first question, please.
Sure. So this is a multi-part question from Stuart Kaplan. He asks, is the Russian threat to the so-called Suwalki Gap real or imagined? If real, how might Lithuania address this threat, or is it addressing it now? And does NATO agree with Lithuania's assessment of this threat? And what are the perspectives of other Baltic states?
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, as I mentioned, the Suwalki Gap, those who don't know, it's the 70 miles probably distance from Kaliningrad region and the Belarus. As I mentioned, Kaliningrad region is the most militarized region in Europe. Even now, they may be not having all the personnel because they were moved to Ukraine, but it still potentially is one of the biggest concentration of military in Russian. And Belarus as well, you have Belarusian army, maybe it's not so big in that, but the Russians can be moved, and they have from time to time exercising where the big amount of Russian army is also being moved to Belarus to see how is that. So we do see as a big potential risk for Lithuania, but it's also Poland as well, and it would be so. How we address what I explained before by really supporting our military, having allied troops on Lithuanian soil. That could be. I know Poles are doing the same. So is that, and another thing what we have, maybe we have transit to Kaliningrad. It goes from the Russian Federation to Kaliningrad region, and it works through the agreement which was done before we joined the European Union. So, and it works, it functions. So there is no any, how to say, there should be any complaint from the Russian part of that. So,
thank you very much. Can we have another question? Katie, please.
Absolutely. So Rob David asks, well, first he says that you mentioned that the Russian war in Ukraine began in 2014, and then asks, in response to that, what might have been done in the immediate response to the Russian aggression that would have precluded the current situation in Ukraine?
I think with this question as well, you also almost answered. Russians will not stop if they're not stopped. before 2014, when the Russians annexed Crimea and started in parts of Lugansk, Donetsk, and all the wars shooting across the border were almost daily and taking. There was war in Georgia 2008. There was some wars in Chechnya, inside of Russia, but they were cruel as well when the whole population was swept and bloodshed. But not even in 2008 or 2014, Western world didn't react enough. There was somehow appeasement period, trying to involve. Russia showed already on a number of occasions that they cannot be regarded as normal country, which we can just agree. They always broke any agreements unless you really speak from the strength position. We do believe that invitation for Ukraine to NATO would have been the answer. So because they respect power and strength, and NATO is the power and strength which they respect. If you remember the NATO doctrine during the Cold War, it was very clear. If Russia makes, then Soviet Union and the Warsaw Alliance makes one step, NATO was ready to retaliate by 2 or 3 steps. So there was not fear to escalate in order to de-escalate. And I think that's why, because of the weak reaction from the West, we have now invasion of 2022.
Thank you.
That's I mean, how in history cannot ask what if or something like that. So I think we have to draw lessons from that and to be now to negotiate from the position of strength and not to believe in that.
Some commentators and also Putin himself, of course, say that NATO expansion was provocative and that provoked Russia into fighting 2 wars, if you like. What do you think of that argument?
I mean, he will use any argument to that, and he also says that Ukraine is not the real country. They don't have their own language. They don't have their own history or that. That's why he has all the right to invade and to make Ukraine part of Russia. So it's how many messages or TV programs we saw, how the children are taken from the families from the United States or something like that. All these things invented things which nobody believes. But so that's why we have to. Yeah, he might use different arguments, but we have to be clever not to use. And I think NATO was always defense alliance. It was never to attack or to start wars. So we shouldn't be, to feel guilty or responsible for what, but it's like bully reacts. He always would try to prove that the victim was a provocative for something. But when you want to fight, you always will find pretext. So
to be clear, even if there had been no expansion of NATO into Eastern Europe, you still think Putin would have invaded?
Oh, that would have been already decades ago. That would be earlier even than it's now. Mm-hmm. That's for sure.
Thank you. Can we have another question, Sivan?
Yes, of course. This is also from Stuart Kaplan, and he asks, assuming that NATO is significantly weakened, given what President Trump has recently said publicly, will European nations seek an independent nuclear umbrella?
It's also this question, what I would say, speculation rather than question. I think the US umbrella worked for so many decades for transatlantic area and security. So I think we should rely on US not looking for some other issues, some other countries' umbrellas.
So the idea,
one umbrella is big enough and it's good. So let's try to that when to put, many umbrellas and try to find to make a hole in this nice good umbrella and then saying that we need some small umbrella. So
the idea of a French nuclear umbrella for Europe is not a sensible one?
why do we need if it's this American one? And I do trust in the United States. They proved very good ally during the decades, especially for us. I can say yes. Another thing, it's a bit different. I'm joining you from the Lithuanian embassy, and it's one of the oldest embassies in the EU in DC, functioning uninterrupted in the same building. The only older one is Poland, and last year we celebrated 100 years. Those who know Lithuanian history, we were occupied for almost 50 years. And our diplomats could work in the same embassy doing those because United States never recognized our occupation. And that's always gave us hope that one day we will be free because we knew that the strongest country in the world supports us and know about us. All the American Lithuanians, Baltic Americans, and some politicians. So when we heard that some American politician or the president, we do remember President Reagan saying, I love Lithuanians or participating, that was a huge boost hope for us. And so America always stand on the right side of history. And I do believe that they will stand now as well. That would be so. That's why I don't like even those speculation and hesitations.
The developments of the last few months in American foreign policy and domestic policy have not given you any cause for concern?
Hence, you know how they like freedom and always fighting and everything. So it's just, we'll see.
Okay, let's hope your optimism is justified. Can we have another question, please, Katie?
Yes, Marius asks, as a Lithuanian myself, I wanted to ask how the recent EU discussions for defense funding are being received in DC, as well as your views on attempts to limit the funding to EU defense industry or states that have signed explicit pacts for defense with the EU. The justification of having autonomous defense capabilities appears justified, not just in the light of the recent US stance, but also in decades of realignment toward East Asia. So how would you view this option?
Could you repeat a bit? That's about strategic independence of Europe as well?
Yes, and about deference funding, basically, like what should we do with states that have signed explicit pacts for defense with the EU?
One thing, Europe, I think it's not still United States remain the most important and most powerful army. So in Europe as well. So their capabilities and it's important. US defense industries as well, they are one of the main suppliers for Europe as well. On the contrary, so we advocate very much for the need to boost American defense industries because many European countries, including Lithuania, are the customers for the US defense products. And those money which I mentioned, much of it goes to United States, buying weapons, equipments, and other. The problem is, and it's not only for the Lithuanians, but for many countries, to wait the lines when we get this production. So I think the demand is there and we need that. Europe also can contribute and can do as well. There are some, but until now, even what we see, American defense industries are not working. They don't have so much production as it's need. They don't answer the existing demand. And Europeans even have bigger shortages. So we still have to look both cooperation with both is important.
Thank you. If there is some ceasefire, hopefully a full ceasefire in Ukraine sometime soon, we need security guarantees. do you see what, or how do you see the role of Europe, the role of Lithuania and the other Baltic states?
It very much would depends also, of course, on the peace agreement and ceasefire, how it goes. But we are ready to give the security guarantees, whatever, and to discuss very profoundly. We need the real security guarantees for Ukraine, and as well to show, because if you don't want another wars, as I mentioned, if we are not strong enough, we don't get to respond to Russia, that would be very complicated and for the future.
Like the
So, but
French.
it's, I mean, yeah, but it's still open questions. How much would they need some troops on the ground, or that would be Ukrainian? There's so many still elements. So I don't want to prejudge and to talk, but I think all the options should be on the table as well to see.
And like British and French troops, Lithuanian troops would be ready to be used for.
Probably, yes. I mean, we have to discuss and to see how is that, but it's.
And would Putin be happy with that?
We'll see. Probably, I don't know, not, but they have to see what would be Ukrainians and what we would be, all of us happy, how it should be. Yeah.
Thank you. Sivan, do we have another question?
Yes, this is from Brian. He asks if potential claims from Russia on the Baltic states stem from the amount of Baltic citizens born in Russia.
Oh, sorry, can you repeat that? Born in Russia citizen?
Yes, he wonders if there's a potential route for Russian claims on the Baltic from the amount of Baltic citizens that are born in Russia.
In Lithuania, we have very few Russian origin or something, and they integrated and opposed and. Okay, demographic, maybe I can say about Lithuanian is more than 80% is Lithuanian ethnic. So 7-8% Poles and 7-8 probably Russians origin, but there are some Russians who've been living in Lithuania from the 17th, 18th century, and so we see that is integrated and. No, I mean, I don't see, especially in Lithuania, that would be any claims for.
So it's more of a problem in Estonia rather than in Lithuania, is that correct?
Maybe in some Estonia, I don't want to talk about that. There are some towns where the predominantly Russian-speaking population is living out, it's called, but I do remember even in Estonia, but it was already 15 years ago or something, they were asked how they relate themselves. Is Estonia, Russia, or European Union? Surprisingly, everybody said, I think European Union or something like that. So they regard themselves more than Europeans then. So we'll see, and yeah.
Thank you very much. We're running quickly out of time, but we have time for a couple of more questions. Then we let the ambassador go to her other
question. Yeah, so sorry.
Busy schedule.
I hope next time I will come to you. That's easier because PTC is it's easier maybe without traveling, but it's always nice to see the.
Absolutely, you're more than welcome to come in person to Chapel Hill and talk to us from the Mandela Auditorium, for example. Katie, can you quickly ask one or two more questions?
Yes, Stuart Kaplan asks about nuclear deterrence. So he asks, were Putin's threats of using tactical nuclear weapons effective in the U.S. in holding Ukraine's counteroffensive back?
Have to ask the U.S. is that, but they wouldn't be so preoccupied by the Russian nuclear. I think they very much, being nuclear country for so many years, they do understand what is the difference between using nuclear or that. But on the other hand, they did so many atrocities by the conventional arms that they don't need even especially tactic nuclear. I mean, there's killing civilians, children, women, torturing something. So I think it's not. So we definitely shouldn't be afraid of nuclear relation.
Thank you. I don't want to end on this very depressing note,
Yeah,
me,
this is something positive.
let me therefore ask you, if you look into the future, in 6 months' time or in 12 months' time, where will we be with the Ukraine war? Where will we be with Russia and Russian-European relations? Do you have a more optimistic view when looking into the future than what you can see right now?
I think I'm more optimistic than when we talked about 2014. I think 2022 was a wake-up call for everyone, especially also Europe, Germany including, because there are so many countries who are dependent on Russian oil and gas, and we're seeing Russia as the economic partner for making business, especially as resources of energy supplies. I don't think we can come back to that. And I think that unless Russia, of course, changes dramatically, but I don't see, especially in 6 or 12 months. So I think this understanding, and I'm sure that this understanding what Russia is for all us would remain. So, and we will shape accordingly our policies and diplomacy.
There's some pressure on Putin himself in domestic Russian politics. The nationalistic hawks are keeping a watchful eye on what Putin is doing. Do you see that some movement in Russia will actually bring him away from power?
I don't think so. I don't believe in that. No. I think he has very centralized his power. He is supported by the population. And if you remember, 2022, some people still were saying that's Putin's war against Ukraine. Now nobody doubts that. It's not Putin's even war, it's Russians' war, because it's so much supported by all the oligarchs, by the political elite, and also people in Russia. We don't see any opposition or different things. So I don't think Putin's somehow Putin power is in danger, or he himself somehow will be. So I think we will be dealing with Putin and his wife for still for some time.
Russia has a lot of economic leeway, particularly in terms of gas and oil deliveries to Europe and, of course, to other countries in the world. And we saw a certain rapprochement between Putin and Trump because of economic reasons. There's also, you know, some European countries like Hungary who still get a lot of gas from Russia. So do you see that leverage Putin has, that economic gas and oil leverage, will actually drive the Western allies apart from each other? It will undermine and weaken the resolve the Europeans in particular have right now to support Ukraine.
No, I think on the contrary, I think Putin lost this leverage during the last years. With Nord Stream 2 broken, when all the stopped supplies by the gas, we see completely different. That's what I said, that I'm more optimistic now than in when I speak about 2014, because Europe is not dependent anymore on Russian gas. Not so much, of course, Hungary, but Hungary has a special position and special attitude towards Russia already, or China in that sense as well, already for some years, and we will not change. But the countries like even Germany, they don't calculate, I think, going back to Russian gas. On the contrary, they are looking for the LNGs. How many? If you have a map, I don't have now with mine, but those who look, you can look to the maps. How was energy infrastructure in Europe 3 years ago, 5 years ago, and now? How many LNG terminals were built, or where the capacities were increased? How many pipelines or something were created and established as well? So Europe has now all the possibilities to get rid of Russian gas and oil. Even Hungary, they can receive now gas from or Baltics or some other through pipelines from Europe, from Central Western Europe, not from Russia via Ukraine. So I think it's a situation is completely there. And about the United States, we will see. I mean, also President Trump speaks about drill, baby drill, and increasing LNG capacities, gas, and everything. So, and I think they also want to be part of to have bigger share of the global market. And I think it's also positive. We will see how it goes. Of course, all the negotiation, everything that's go, but I think there are more elements, not only business involved.
And will we see an end to the Ukraine war in 2025?
I hope so. We will see, yes. But the most important, yes, that it would be how it ends and
That it
on
is
what terms.
and
We
yeah.
will so yeah. So Europe, I think, stands behind and together with United States to support in any possible way that this peace now would be durable and long-standing. It will not be only ceasefire to prepare for the next invasion and that, because Russia's economy is war economy. It's completely how much they spend and how the economy works for all the supplies to war is there. So we shouldn't be naive as well that they would sit quietly when they get ceasefire or that. So we shouldn't have the Minsk III agreement, but that's why we all have to work together as well to ensure that it's.
Ambassador, thank you very much for talking to us today. Thank you for enlightening us about the Lithuanian view and also for your strong support to Ukraine and to European unity in a defense and security vision as well. Thanks an awful lot. It has been a great pleasure to have you here at the Krasno Global Event Series. I would also like to thank all our audience for sticking with us. There will be further events to come, but for the time being, thank you, the Ambassador of Lithuania, for coming to talk to us. And perhaps in the future, we would like to welcome you in person in Chapel Hill. It would be a great pleasure if you came along to us and see us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. Yeah, thank you for everyone.